Vancouver, BC, one of the most popular, if not the most popular city in all of Canada. Just don't tell Toronto people that. But there's another city not far away that's growing in popularity every single day, and is actually set to overtake Vancouver's population within the next 10 years. What city is that? Well, Surrey, BC. And the reason for that? Well, it's coming right up, so stay tuned. What's going on, guys? Alex Dunbar here, your favorite local realtor, back again with another video. And today, I'm going to be covering my top reasons why you should move from Vancouver to Surrey, or just choose Surrey over Vancouver. Now, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of backlash around this one, so before you have an opinion or get upset, just wait till the end of the video. So this idea was actually prompted by a recent article written on Daily Hive. So what I'm going to do with you is share my screen, go through the article, and tell you what I do agree with, what I don't agree with, and what I'd like to add. So let's get right into it. So here we have the article, my top reasons why you should leave Vancouver and move to Surrey by Nikita Martins. Sorry if I messed that up. So let's take a look at what she had to say. So if you just about had it with the cost of living in Vancouver, but don't exactly see yourself taking any drastic measures like moving to Alberta, Surrey might be an easy answer. Living outside of Vancouver's downtown core will nearly always present a cheaper cost of living. However, as someone who was raised in Surrey, I've seen the city has made major strides in terms of development, culture, and safety. This is why I argue it should be near or at the top of your list if you're considering moving out of downtown and into another Metro Vancouver city. And here's a breakdown of why. So first of all, as she mentioned, there are a ton of people that are actually making the move into Alberta. And just to be completely transparent and upfront, that's going to be far cheaper than just making the move to Surrey. And you'll see here why as we go over her first point in the article. So, cost of living. I'll cut to the most important factor when debating whether to move to Surrey, the financial benefit. So this is a major benefit. However, once again, it's not going to be the same as moving somewhere like Calgary, where you can buy detached homes for under $500,000, whereas Surrey, you're not going to find any sort of a detached home under $1 million. But I digress. The good news is Surrey checks off this very important box. Using crowdsourced data from Numbeo, the average monthly cost for a single person in the city is $1,339 before you factor in rent. That is 9.8% lower than in Vancouver. I would almost argue, dependent on your lifestyle, that it could be a lot lower than this. I've had friends that have lived downtown Vancouver and spent upwards of $50,000 on just going out on a regular basis, getting food, getting drinks, coffee shops, because the reason to live downtown Vancouver is so you can do these things, because you're near the Canucks games and the BC Lions games and the bars and the clubs and the coffee shops and the restaurants. So if you're living there and you're not experiencing these things, you kind of have to ask yourself, why are you actually here? Unless it's just to be closer to work, right? At least in my opinion. Now, again, I'm talking about downtown Vancouver. We can kind of expand that into the rest of Vancouver, east and the west sides. However, prices aren't going to vary extremely drastically. So I think it just really comes down to asking yourself, if you're living in Vancouver and specifically downtown Vancouver, what are you getting there that you can't get elsewhere, and specifically in the city of Surrey? So moving on. Additionally, rent in Surrey is a whopping 30.6% lower than in Vancouver. This is correct. To rent a one bedroom in the city center area will cost you about $1,800, correct, while one bedroom outside the central area will cost about $350 less. What I'll add to this is if you're willing to live in a basement suite, you can cut your costs about 10 to 15% typically versus being in a condo. Now if we're moving to different parts of Surrey, the city center is going to be in Whalley, right next to the SkyTrain, so it's going to be the most convenient for transportation. However, I think there's far better areas towards the outskirts of the city where you'll actually be able to get rent even slightly cheaper than what it's stating here. Additionally, if we're looking at real estate prices, they're gonna be on average about the same as this, in terms that they're about 30% cheaper on average. Again, there's a number of things that's gonna depend on. So detached homes, there's gonna be the greatest differential. Condos, there may not be quite as much, and then townhomes sit somewhere in the middle, but I think 30% is a pretty good estimate on these numbers. According to Numbeo, restaurants and groceries are both lower priced in Surrey too. I would agree with this. I don't think it's a substantial number. However, there is a slight difference. Additionally, in terms of gas, I don't think those numbers vary much at all either, maybe a couple cents a liter, but really nothing to have you concerned about. It says, check out the full breakdown of the cost of living comparison between Surrey and Vancouver here. So I will post a link to this article if you want to check it out yourself. However, we're moving on. So convenience, especially if you end up living near one of the SkyTrain stations. So as I mentioned, Scott Road, Gateway, Surrey Central, or King George, it can be so easy to jump on the train and head into Vancouver. So this is true if you are living in the Surrey Central area. The city city center area. However, if you're further away, if you're somewhere Cloverdale, South Surrey, things of that nature, you're not that close to the SkyTrain, and you're probably going to want a car, at least at this point in time. There is a new SkyTrain that will be extended through the Fleetwood and Cloverdale communities by the year 2028. However, it's not there yet. So I would say that for the most part, you probably should have a car if you're having to drive far distances on a daily basis, whether that's for work or whatever else. So if you have a work from home setup or hybrid work schedule, you can easily pop into the Vancouver office if you live in these areas. So I think that's a great thing about living in Surrey. If you do have this ability, maybe you're only going into the office twice a week, maybe 3 times, then you can still get there in, we'll call it 40 to 60 minutes, dependent on where you live and where you have to get to. Additionally, the time of day that you have to get there, because traffic can play a major role here. Now, taking the train from King George to Main Street Science World takes a little over 30 minutes, just about the same time that it would take to drive. So again, this is true if you're specifically in that area. However, if you have to drive 20-25 minutes to the SkyTrain, you're gonna have to tack this on top. While it's convenient to live near a SkyTrain station, it's not a bad idea to still have access to a vehicle. This is true for the majority of Surrey. Surrey is huge, and while many areas do not have businesses running through, exploring this huge city is much easier with a vehicle, so it's important to factor that cost in. So in peak times of traffic, it can take 30 to 45 minutes just to get from one side of the city of Surrey to the other. Now, if you were actually to overlay Vancouver on top of Surrey, Surrey's landmass and size is actually 2.5 times greater. Now, while its population is rapidly rising, Vancouver does have the top right now, but Surrey is catching up very quickly, and as I mentioned, that population is set to overtake Vancouver's sometime in the next 10 years, and there's so much room to expand that it will probably go far beyond that. Surrey really isn't much of a walkable city unless you live in the hubs, Central City, Newton, Guildford. This is true. I mean, if you do live in a place like Clayton potentially, or certain parts of South Surrey, I do think it is quite walkable. Places like Grandview Heights or the King George corridor. However, for the most part, you're definitely still gonna want a car. It's nowhere near the same level of convenience as living downtown, where you can just take an elevator down from your condo, get onto the street, and you're 5 minutes from absolutely everything. You're not quite that close, but things are so close by in Surrey. They may not be walkable per se, might be 15 minutes tops, 20 minutes tops, dependent on where you live, but you're gonna be able to get to pretty much anything you need: shopping, groceries, gym, entertainment, within a 5 to 10 minute drive within most of the city. Moving on, the great outdoors. So once you have access to a vehicle or the patience to catch a bus, Surrey is your oyster. The city is more than twice the size of Vancouver, as I mentioned, and is home to 250 parks. So if you didn't know, Surrey actually used to be known as the City of Parks. It has since changed over to "The Future Lives Here" as its slogan, but it was for good reason that it was called the City of Parks previously, because there is just so many of them absolutely everywhere you look. And Surrey actually protects their parks better than any other municipality I've ever seen, which is fantastic because you don't have to worry about living beside a park and having the city or a private developer come in, knock it down, and throw up a townhome or condo building site. So that is one fantastic thing about living in Surrey. There are stunning nature trails throughout the city that are perfect to cycle through and go for a morning or evening stroll. Some obvious places to visit are the Green Timbers Urban Forest, Crescent Beach, and Bear Creek Park. So in terms of the trails, dependent on the part of the city you live in, for instance Cloverdale, there are tons of trails that are just going through every neighborhood that you can just walk down, bike down, whatever that may be. This was something that I used to do on a daily basis when I did live in Cloverdale, and it was super convenient because you could just hop on your bike or go for a jog or walk or run and go down all of these protected green belts and different trails to get some exercise or just get out of the house. And again, this is also available in other parts of the city. However, this, just from my experience, was one of the great parts about living in Cloverdale itself. Now, moving on to the parks, there are great parks both to just go and explore nature and visit, but there's also great recreational parks in terms of places like Cloverdale Athletic Park, where they have several soccer fields, baseball fields, tennis courts, and other things to either join leagues or just go play recreationally. And there are so many of these across the city. Another example, South Surrey Athletic Park, where you're gonna find tons of fields for baseball, soccer, rugby, a hockey arena, a gym, just absolutely everything. And each individual community, so the 6 communities within Surrey, all have their own community centers, if not more than one. So they definitely make an effort to have the infrastructure and have the different resources to support each and every community. So while Vancouver admittedly has a plethora of beautiful ways to sit by the water and walk through fresh forests, I argue Surrey has the same. Now, of course, it may not quite be the same. Vancouver is Vancouver, and it's at a high price point for a reason. You're so close to the mountains there. You've got the ocean right there, but look at places like South Surrey. You are minutes away from getting to the beach. Then you can head east into places like Campbell Valley or Hazelmere, where you've got some of these incredible parks, maybe not as many mountains and not as close to the mountains as Vancouver, but you add an extra 30-40 minutes onto your travel time and you can get to the same mountains as you would have in Vancouver. We also have the ability to go out into Maple Ridge, into Abbotsford, into Mission, and these other places that have amazing outdoor activities and things to do, right? Where Vancouver, yes, you can go further north and you can come to some of these areas as well, but Surrey is so well connected to some of these other cities that have so much to offer nature-wise, that there's so much that you don't even know about, and you need to continue to explore to even scratch the surface of the iceberg, because there's just so much to do. Now, moving on, food and restaurants. So the food. No one can argue with me. Surrey is home to mouth-watering hidden gems, serving up authentic, jewel-worthy cuisine. Foodies will never get bored. Here are some personal recommendations in no order. So before we get to that, I just want to state that Surrey is extremely multicultural, and you're going to find all types and varieties of restaurants, from little cafes to expensive restaurants to more cultural side of things, whether that's sushi or Greek food or Indian food or Italian. There's just so many things to choose from. You're really never gonna run out of options, and there's something for everyone. And because again, it's close to the water, similar to Vancouver, we get amazing fish, amazing sushi. Sushi is one of my favorite foods. So everything you're getting here for the most part is very, very fresh. And don't get me wrong, there are some bigger name chain restaurants that you're gonna see pretty much everywhere, but there's also a ton of smaller mom and pop shops or just popular restaurants that are one-offs by famous chefs and things like that. So now let's take a look at her personal recommendations. So we have the Diamond Sweets Restaurant, Green Lettuce, Afghan Chopin, Donair Affair, Gateway Pizza, My Shanty, Rue Cafe and Bar, Tommy's Jerk, Nagoya Sushi. So I have definitely been to a few of these. I think there's some fantastic recommendations, but even as you can see from the names that are listed here, it's just such a variety, right? Which really ties into our next point, moving on to the arts, culture, and events, is again, Surrey is just so diverse. There is a ton of immigration happening. Obviously, at some point in time, everyone had to immigrate from somewhere to come here, but we're seeing extremely high numbers in the past couple of years, and we will be moving into the future, which brings tons of different cultures and ethnicities together to be able to celebrate and learn from one another and really just make it a place that's welcoming to everyone. So, as we move on, obvious mentions are the Surrey Art Gallery, Surrey Civic Theatres, and Museum of Surrey. However, art and culture could go way beyond these. You can find local music festivals, tons of food, events, and rodeos. So, as I mentioned in other videos, there's tons of other massive events. There is the Canada Day event in Cloverdale, one of the largest in all of Canada. You've got the Cloverdale Rodeo. You've got the Fusion Festival in the Surrey Central area, and there's so many more that Surrey just always tries to put on these different events on a yearly basis and get everyone involved, which makes for such a great city and community. Now, moving on to the safety. So this is definitely one of the things that people have a negative perception of. However, let's look a little bit deeper, because I think a lot of the time that those claims aren't fully substantiated. Now, don't get me wrong, there's definitely crime in Surrey, and there's definitely homelessness and drug use, just like any other major city. But I digress, let's move on. Surrey honestly has an unfair reputation that the city isn't safe, as I said. If you don't believe me, let me point you to some of the latest statistics from the Surrey RCMP. So let's take a look. According to the police department, violent crimes decreased nearly 15% in its first quarter compared to the same time last year. This may be comforting to those who are feeling more and more unsafe in Vancouver amid concerns about crime in the downtown area. So just to put this in perspective, if you know Vancouver well, or you've been there before and you've been on the downtown east side of Hastings, it is a shocking area. If you, again, haven't been there, there is a ton of homelessness, tents, drug use, crime, and you would be surprised to think that people think so highly of Vancouver. But this only spans for a couple of blocks. And you move over 3-4 blocks and you're at some of the nicest places in all of Vancouver. But if we were to put a bias over the entire city based on this small area, small neighborhood within the city itself, you can see where this would go. But obviously you're not going to do that because there's so many other beautiful places right within the city of Vancouver. You go over to Kitts Beach, you go to Cole Harbour, you go to certain parts of downtown Yaletown, right? Just to name a few. If we were to tell somebody that Vancouver was a terrible place and there was so much crime and homelessness and everything else just because of this one small neighborhood, and you forgot about the beauty of the rest of it, it wouldn't be fair, would it? Well, people do this to Surrey a lot of the time as well, unfortunately, because there are certain areas and locations and neighborhoods that there are higher levels of crime. There is higher levels of homelessness. There is more drug use. But to put a blanket statement on the rest of the city, which again is 2.5 times the size of Vancouver, it's just not fair. And so the closer you get to the different cores of certain cities and around more commercial space, around public transit, the SkyTrain, there is going to be a little bit more transient activity. There is more homelessness, crime, and other things. However, personally, I enjoy most of the border areas of Surrey. So the further north, east, and south you go. Personally, the west side of Surrey isn't for me, but it could potentially be a good spot for you. I do find that the western part of Surrey in certain areas isn't quite as nice as the rest. Does have a little bit more lower income housing and things of that nature. But this is just my opinion. I have several other videos talking about where I think the best neighborhoods and worst neighborhoods are in the city of Surrey. So if you want to get a little more information on that, be sure to check out some of the other videos on my channel. But let's continue. The city's future. As someone who was raised in Surrey, I've seen the city evolve and develop rapidly over the past decade. There are some exciting new developments which are underway in Surrey, like the plan to build 1,600 new homes in towers next to SkyTrain Gateway Station, the potential satellite University of British Columbia campus in Surrey City Centre, and the Cloverdale Hospital project. So these are some of the great things that are in the pipeline. And again, the city really puts a lot of time, energy, resources, and money into the city itself and building more infrastructure and developing and improving things in the city for its people. Now, as I mentioned, there's also going to be the SkyTrain extension. On top of these things that have been mentioned, they're also getting an additional medical school in the Surrey City Centre, which is going to be a massive draw for people, especially medical students, of course. And it's definitely a good leading indicator that there's going to be continued growth and it could be a fantastic spot for investment. Now, moving on, the population's expected growth is what makes it the ideal spot for prospective homeowners. So again, just in terms of future growth, future potential, and looking at it from investment perspective, not just a livability perspective, now you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, right? You're having an area that is likely to grow and increase in price over time, and also something that you're going to enjoy living in, whether that's for the rest of your life or it's just a stepping stone until you get to the next destination. Now, closing it out, like every city, there are some pros and cons. If you can swing it, living in downtown Vancouver is a dream. However, the challenges it's posed over recent years make moving into other areas of Metro Vancouver much more appealing. So the most recent article I've seen stated that a 1-bedroom apartment in Vancouver is currently going for $3,000 a month. That is absolutely insane, because that would be $36,000 per year, 100% interest that you're never gonna see back. Now, if you're somebody who doesn't have a high paying job, let's say you're making $50,000, $60,000 a year, closer to the median income, you're looking at $36,000, and that's gonna be part of your after-tax income, right? If you're making $60,000, that's not what you're taking home. Then if you're taking $36,000 from that, it's gonna be tough for you. So again, just another reason to be exploring some of these other cities, Surrey specifically, but if not, there are some other great ones. path. So if you do move to Surrey from Vancouver, I'm sure there will be things to miss. However, after some time getting used to it, you'll possibly realize that those things are just a short train ride or drive away. So that's personally how I feel. I couldn't see myself living in Vancouver itself, well, at least not the downtown core. Other parts of the city potentially, but it really just doesn't make sense for me. I don't necessarily need to be right in the middle of the hustle and bustle. There's just so much traffic there. Not to say that there's not in Surrey, but it's a completely different ball game. You're always having to look for parking, pay for parking. Feels like everything you do in Vancouver comes at a cost, whereas Surrey, there's just nice wide streets. You can pretty much park wherever, especially in your own neighborhood, and you're not gonna have to worry about paying for parking. I know it's a minor thing, but it is something that is a bit of a pet peeve for me, especially if you're out and about on a daily basis. But I still go to Canucks games, I still go to Whitecaps games, I still go downtown to experience the different restaurants or activities or other things that are going on. I just don't feel the need to be doing that on a daily or even weekly basis. So when I want to do that, I'm able to get down there in, again, 45 to 60 minutes, and I can experience that and then make my way home. However, if you got a ton of money to spend, you want to be in that scene, you want to be close to everything you really need just walking distance away, Vancouver's for you. I'm not trying to talk you out of it. However, if you're someone a little more like myself, you like a little bit more peace and quiet while still being close to pretty much everything you need, at least in a 5 to 10 minute drive, Surrey could be the right option for you. So hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity on comparing Surrey versus Vancouver and why I think it could be a great spot for many people who either are currently living in Vancouver or are thinking about moving to Vancouver, but you just don't want to spend that exorbitant amount of money. I have tons of other videos talking about the city of Surrey, the best neighborhoods, the worst neighborhoods, pros and cons, cost of living there, community spotlights for each individual community. So definitely check those out if you're interested in learning more. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be upset by this video and going to protect Vancouver at all costs. Again, not saying that it's a bad place, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. Let me know down below. And if you did enjoy today's video and got any sort of value from it whatsoever, all I ask is that you hit that thumbs up button so the algorithm will push it out to more amazing individuals just like yourself who want to learn more about the city of Surrey. And if you are considering buying or selling in the city of Surrey or any of the surrounding cities for that matter, and you want to have a conversation about what your options are, you can scroll down and click the first link in the description to book a call with me at the time that works best for you. Thanks so much for watching. Share this video with a friend if you think they would find value in it. And before you get out of here, check out another video on our channel, and we'll see you in the next one.